had that dream again. My small business needs to hire, but I don't use LinkedIn, and I hire an energy vampire. But also, they're a literal vampire. And suddenly, my team is spending all their time sharpening wooden stakes and buying bulk silver and rehearsing ancient chants, and then I wake up.
Don't let hiring nightmares ruin your dreams. LinkedIn Jobs' new AI assistant takes insights from over 1 billion professionals to create a short list of the best fits for you. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/quality. Start hiring today with LinkedIn.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso. Gift magical mornings with Nespresso Virtuo Pop. Compact and stylish, Virtuo Pop is made to meet every morning coffee craving. From espresso to coffee, hot or iced, at the click of a button. And celebrate the season with Nespresso's limited edition coffee flavors. Sweet almond and hibiscus, cinnamon and candied tamarind, and festive double espresso. Magic in the making. Shop the holiday gift collection exclusively at Nespresso.com.
Hey, where you been? Buckeye Talk is about to begin. Hey, come on in.
Welcome back to Buckeye Talk and Merry Christmas. I'm Stephen Means and that's Stefan Krajisnik and that is Andrew Gillis. As promised earlier this week, it's the first of two deep dives into the Ohio State-Miami matchup. Now that Ohio State's first opponent in the college football playoff is official, they'll face Miami in the Cotton Bowl on December 31st. What's crazy is, and I was thinking about this, Miami actually kind of gets screwed in all this because they get the least amount of preparation time for their next opponent because they played Saturday at noon and then they're going to play the first game of the quarterfinal. This game probably should have been the night game on Friday instead, just for the sake of everybody getting the same amount of time. But listen, I'm not here to. It's more of a thing, and I'm sure Mario Cristobal will point it out at some point over the millions of interviews he's going to do because that's what coaches do is find things to complain about. But these are deep dives, as we did last year in the college football playoff. We'll be doing each side of the ball. Today is Ohio State's offense versus Miami's defense, and we're splitting these up into three different categories. It'll be the same both sides of the ball. There's three different categories. It's quarterback / offensive coordinator versus defensive coordinator. We have the wide receivers and tight ends versus the defensive backs. So that's essentially just the skill positions on both sides. And then the offensive line and defensive line. And I guess we can talk a little bit of the running back too with the offensive line, defensive line conversation. That's probably the best place to have a run game conversation. We're going to split them up into those three things. And we have questions we're going to answer with all three categories. Same questions. Who has the edge? Which side actually needs to be better for their team to win the game? A thing about Ohio State and or Miami that makes you most confident in this group? A thing about Ohio State and or Miami that makes you most nervous about this group? And then the biggest X factor, and that's every single position group we're going to go through. And as I told them before we started recording, we do not want to do 2-hour pods with these. Because, listen, 2 hours is a long time to talk. We do enough 2-hour pods. And so we're trying to cap this up like an hour 40. So I'm literally going to be starting a timer for 35 minutes. And if that timer goes off and one of us three are in the middle of our thought, guess who doesn't get to complete their thought? Whoever got caught at the timer. So keep those things in mind. And we're going to start on offense with Julian Sands / Brian Hartline, ? Versus Corey Heatherman, who is the defensive coordinator at Miami. Gillis, start with you. Who has the edge? Julian Sands / OC or Miami defensive coordinator?
I think it's Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
I also don't think it's Brian. I don't know. I don't know if it's Brian Hartline. Like, are we sure that it's Brian Hartline that we should be talking about in this category?
I mean, that's why I put question mark.
Yeah.
To be fair, earlier this week, we talked, we're doing this on a Sunday, but we're acting like we're doing this later in the week. Earlier this week on Monday, we talked with the offense and defense, and Ryan Day stepped in as the offensive coordinator. So do with that information what you will. Yeah,
so like I think it's Ohio State. There's so much to just kind of deep dive into that. Like I don't think Miami has seen like this level of attack before. I think the thing that I think can really kind of get Miami in trouble, and we can get like there's going to be some level of overlap, but the thing I think that everybody knows is that their defensive line is really good, and I think the thing that can get Miami in trouble is if Julian Sayin is really accurate, which we have seen him be in pretty much every single one of their games and every single one of their moments this year. Heartline/Day are, keeping chains moving, keeping things just flowing, keeping Miami on their heels. I trust them more than I trust Miami and that defensive coaching staff. So I think it's Ohio State.
Go ahead, Stefan.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I guess it's a little tough because we are recording before we talk to Ryan Day and company, but this Miami defense is really good. Like, full go, like, this is a really good defense. And if there's any uncertainty about what Ohio State's going to look like when they come out and play in terms of play calling and scheme and things of that nature, I almost would argue the opposite, where this Miami defense kind of knows what it is, and maybe this Ohio State Ohio State offense is figuring itself out a bit and trying to, determine what its best, personnel packages and play calls and all of that. Like, if this Ohio State offense is still trying to figure it out, I don't know, man. I maybe go the opposite way and trust this Miami defense and its coordinator a bit, just because you know what you're getting from that unit while you're still trying to figure out exactly what Ohio State's offense is, right? And this is maybe a good thing, maybe a bad thing, whichever way you want to look at it. The last time we saw Ohio State's offense, it was not good, right? It was not executing in the red zone. It was not, the play calls had you scratching your head a bit. And I think what's interesting with that is it's probably a bit of an anomaly for what their season was in terms of how poorly they played offensively against Indiana. And you could point to that and say, okay, that's kind of an outlier and they bounced back. Or it's the culmination of some things that we had pointed out, throughout the course of the regular season in terms of red zone issues, run game struggles, questioning some of the personnel packages. So I think right now, at the time of recording, I'd probably lean toward having some more confidence in Miami's defense than I would Ohio State's offense. Because I think if you were to say, okay, which unit do you have questions about? I don't have any questions about Miami's defense. I think it's a good group with a lot of talent, especially in the defensive front. And we're going to, talk more about the defensive front as this podcast goes on. But I trust that unit probably a little bit more than Ohio State's offense right now.
So it's interesting the way you guys looked at it. And I think both answers are correct because of the way you looked at it. Gillis, you went Sand has the edge, essentially, and kind of just ignored the offensive coordinator portion of this. While Stefan, you're saying Miami has the edge because you ignored the Sand part of this. And if that's the way you want to slice it, then neither answer is wrong. In fact, and the reason why I'm saying that is because I also did the same thing. Sand has the edge because he's easily the best quarterback that Corey Heatherman will have faced this year. Like, it's not even close, right? Because I, with all due respect, I think CJ Carr is a very talented quarterback. Julian Sand in game 14 as a starter versus CJ Carr on the road in his first game as a starter are two very different people. So it's and then Marcel Reed, he's a very talented quarterback. He's not better than Julian Sand. So if we're just talking raw quarterback ability, the ability to throw the ball, they have not seen anything quite like Julian Sand, which is why I would give that edge, because I do think even looking at Miami's schedule this year, and I don't want to, I have a lot of numbers and stuff and I don't want to waste them all here, but Miami's numbers are very impressive. And obviously we all watch what they did against Texas A&M. A lot of those numbers have not necessarily come against teams who have the type of talent at quarterback that Julian Sand is, even if the overall passing attacks themselves have been quality. It's almost like one of those things where numbers are great, but it's not Julian Sand, Jeremiah Smith, and Carnell Tate attached to those numbers. And so they're impressive. They're not scary the way that Julian Sand, Carnell Tate, and Jeremiah Smith, especially if those two are healthy, might be able to do so. But that's edge. But who actually needs to be better if they want to win this game? Stefan, I'll start with you.
That's a good question. It's probably Miami's defense / their coordinator, right? I think Miami's route to winning this game, I think, is a low-scoring contest. I just, despite, questions that we have about Ohio State's offense, I think getting in a shootout with Ohio State is probably a bad idea for most teams. I thought, the way Indiana played is probably the blueprint for beating Ohio State, a low-scoring game where, because it's just so hard to go against Ohio State's defense and try to consistently put up points. And I know we're going to do another pod where we talk about, Miami's offense against Ohio State's defense, but you got to keep it low scoring. And I think this Miami defense has to show up if they have any chance of playing well. I think they got to put pressure on Sand the way we saw Indiana do it. I think they got to be able to, at least challenge Ohio State's receivers, right? Like, Jeremiah had a really good game against Indiana, but I thought Indiana otherwise did a pretty good job of containing Ohio State's receivers. And it was one of those things where it's like, I don't know, JJ's going to get his, right? You kind of assume JJ's going to have 100 yards and a touchdown, and you kind of figure it out from there, and you kind of try to contain the other guys. So I think if Miami has any chance or any hope of winning this game, it has to slow down Ohio State's offense and keep things quiet. So I would probably say that's the most important phase for Miami is its defense and being able to contain this Ohio State offense. So I'll say that it's more important for them that their defense shows up.
Gillis?
Yeah, agreed. I don't want to add too much to that. Like, you look at the point total that Miami probably has to get to offensively to win this game, and you start to think, oh boy, like, we have Carson Beck. We maybe need to steal a possession, steal some points. Miami does force a lot of turnovers. We saw that against A&M. So I don't want to repeat everything Stefan said, but I think it's Miami's defense, because if Ohio State starts scoring, I think Miami's cooked.
Does Miami force a lot of turnovers, or did they play a lot of teams this year who turn the ball over?
I think the answer is yes, probably.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
I feel like I feel like their first round game was the most Miami game ever. And I was like chiming in with our texters throughout the game, 614-350-3315. And someone asked me, is this good offense? Is this terrible offense or elite defense? And I went, yes.
Are you guys a little like, by the time we got to halftime, were you a little bummed out that, because I think the conditions played into that game, like it was windy as hell. Like, were you a little bummed out that like that was kind of the backdrop to that game? Because I was really watching that being like, all right, I want to see like what Ohio State's next opponent has. And it kind of felt like whatever game plan or like whatever had worked for those teams, it a little bit got thrown out the window, because it's like you're playing in such a different circumstance than like playing in a dome like they're going to do in Dallas.
Well, we watched a kick that was going straight down the middle, go wide right. Like, that's how bad the wind was.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but like specialists in kicking aside, because that game.
Well, I know, but I'm just saying, like, that's how wind. Like, that's
I know,
the level
like,
of wind.
But the answer is Stefan's quite like, sure, it impacted the kicking, but I don't think it impacted the way either of those teams play football.
I think it impacted the deep shots you could take.
Yeah,
right. But I guess like Texas A&M connected on a deep shot. They tried to connect on another one and didn't catch the ball. Carson Beck doesn't have the arm talent to convert deep shots anyway.
Yeah.
So it's not right. Like Malachi Tony, he can catch it downfield, but he's really like, I texted this to our texters. Like, he's like best case scenario what Legend Bay might be at Ohio State, where it's like, I don't care. Just put the ball in his hands, whether it's as a return specialist or a running back or as a slot receiver, just put the ball in his kid's hands and we'll figure it out from there. Vertical passing attack isn't, I think, the first thing I'm scared of with either one of those teams. And so, sure, yes, would you have liked to? There's some times where maybe Miami tried to throw a kill shot or Texas A&M tried to throw a kill shot and it didn't connect because the wind didn't let you do it. But I don't know if it was the difference between Marcel Reed wasn't going to have 275 passing yards in that game, and then Carson Beck wasn't going to have 350. So it was a bummer, because it probably should have been like 15-12 or something like that. And the kickers got in the way of things. But that was it. To be honest with you, I thought that game was more entertaining than the Alabama-Oklahoma game, because everything about the Alabama-Oklahoma game was like, both of these teams are mid, and they just spent 60 minutes showing us this. The Miami-Texas A&M game is everything you thought it was going to be. Mario Cristobal sucks at time management. These defenses are awesome. Both of these quarterbacks are going to put the ball in harm's way whenever it's time to put the ball in harm's way. And whenever Miami's offensive coordinator figures out that maybe they should give the ball to Mark Fletcher, they're going to get that first touchdown and win the football game. Hey, what do you know? They finally gave the ball to Mark Fletcher and they win the game 10-3. I think it's fun fact. Corey Heatherman has actually played against Ohio State before, when he was Rutgers' defensive linebackers coach in 2022 and 2023. He wasn't the DC though, so hey, it's not your defensive game plan, but you are in charge of the linebackers. Rutgers gave up 34 and 49 in those two games against Ohio State, and one of those stats is a little bit more important, and I'll bring that up later. You want to know where he was before he got to Rutgers and who he was working for? I'll give you a hint. It's the only coach who has beaten Ohio State this year.
Oh, he was with Sig.
Yeah,
he was a JMU Duke.
And like when Sig first got there, he was with him, and so that's just interesting. I'm gonna watch my old boss's film from the Big Ten championship game.
From Rutgers to JMU?
No, he went from James Madison. This is before James Madison was an FBS program. He was there from 19 to 21, and then he went to Rutgers under Greg Schiano, 22 to 23. Another another coach who knows Ryan Day quite well. And then he was at Minnesota last year as their DC and linebackers coach, and has since come to Miami and put together a really, really good defense for them. I agree with you guys. I think Miami's defense has to be better because it has to make sure this game stays under 20 for as long as humanly possible. I don't know if I'm saying that as like confidently though, as you guys are saying it, because what if Ohio State starts scoring? I'll wait. But at some point, that idea that at some point it starts to sound like we're SEC media with the hypotheticals with what if Ohio State starts doing something they've never done. But I'll save that. Gillis, you're up. The thing about OSU and or Miami. So this is just something that makes you feel confident in Ohio State's ability to do something in this game that essentially leads to a win.
Yeah, this is funny because when you sent us this, I thought I have the same answer for 2 of your prompts. And it's that Ohio State just lost, and that makes me confident in them.
Yeah.
And the reason it makes me confident in them is the way that Ryan Day talked about it, because I think one of the things that you have to do, like in this business, and like we have, listeners and texters that are smart enough to understand, like, we'll get it fixed. We'll review the film and we'll look at it. Like, they understand that that's coach speak, right? Like, then we have to understand that that's coach speak. But like the way that Ryan Day was talking about, like, hey, losing can, mean this or it can mean that. And, it can show some things that weren't there, and it can, show you some problems that weren't there, some problems that you ignored, and blah, blah, blah. And I think this might have showed them some problems that either they realized they had to rectify, or it also showed them that they had some problems that maybe they didn't know that they had. And Cignetti is a great coach, and Indiana's staff is a great staff, and they put together a game plan that I think Stefan and I, we talked about it at some point, Stefan, where it was like Lorenzo Styles was on the field, they threw right at him. Devin Sanchez was on the field, they threw right at him. It felt like they ran at Kenyatta Jackson. It felt like they did certain things where it's like they got to the red zone and they stiffened up. Like, it felt like they did certain things that just like we had been saying all year, where Ohio State, maybe not weaknesses, but at least flaws or, problems. And Indiana took advantage of that. So I think I'm confident in OSU to figure out what the heck happened. I think I'm confident in them to not run back what we saw in the red zone against Indiana. Maybe it was a Carnell Tate, Jeremiah Smith health thing. Like, Ryan talked about like kind of managing their snaps. It's like, okay, at some point, like, this isn't managing snaps anymore, right? Like, this is like let's see this thing cook. So I think I'm confident in Ohio State because I think it gave them a reality check. The Indiana loss. I think it changed some things for him. And, whether or not we have changes at right guard to talk about, or, changes about the red zone, or changes about the play caller, like, I don't know, like, but I do think that I feel pretty good about Ohio State coming off of a loss.
Yeah, I think to piggyback off that too, it's like, Sonny Styles is a great leader for this team, right? There's no questions about that. And, earlier this year, he had talked, whether it was on a radio show or interview with the media, he talked about how when they come in on Sundays, they review the tape, even after a win, as if they lost. That's great, but also, like, I don't know, reviewing the film after a loss still goes a little different than reviewing the film after a win. And I think you're right, Gillis. Like, there will be a lot of aspects to Ohio State coming off a loss that makes Ohio State better. But I think in terms of X's and O's, I think a loss will probably make Ohio State realize in terms of offense, the conversation we're having here, and that running those tight end packages isn't the right thing to do, right? And having, all those multiple tight ends on the field in the red zone maybe isn't the best move when you have guys like Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith. So it's like, it's funny because we've had the conversation all season where we joke and it's like, okay, this is the game where Ohio State lets it rip and they're going to go out and score 50 points. And then they go out and do the tight ends thing. And it's like, I think back to like the Purdue game. It's like, they put up a lot of points and it still wasn't exactly like OSU like unleashing its offense and leaning on its receivers in the way that we thought that maybe they would. So it's like, do I go into this Miami game and try to tell myself they're just going to be what they've been telling us all year? Or I finally trust them to change and go, lean on its receivers and use what we think, its fastball is. And I think I'm picking the latter. I'm opting into trusting Ryan Day and leaning on, their receivers. Right. So I think the Indiana loss might have maybe exemplified that. Because, like, if they squeak out a win against Indiana, let's say, Fielding makes that field goal, they go to overtime, and like Ohio State wins 16-13 or something like that, or 20-13, whatever you think the final score would be. Would Ohio State be going into the playoff thinking that the way it approached the Indiana game was the right way, at least offensively? I don't know.
Maybe.
But I know losing that game,
exactly.
Losing that game definitely makes you say that was not the right way to approach, using our offense and using our best players. So, yes, losing, I think, in terms of motivation and things like that, it helps, right? The team coming off a loss, like angry Alabama was like always a thing under Nick Saban. I think angry Ohio State's probably a thing under Ryan Day. But I think in terms of X's and O's, it's a good opportunity for them to kind of, be able to look in the mirror and say, hey, we lost because we did this. And it gives me confidence that they're going to approach, this Miami game the right way offensively. And if they don't, well, then we'll talk about that before the Fiesta Bowl, because I think they could still probably win playing that way against Miami, but I don't know if they can win that way against Georgia and or Indiana/Oregon.
It's like, have you ever driven with somebody who's like a little bit of a reckless driver, and then you like say something at the end of it, and they go, "But did you die though?"
Yeah, you're not allowed to be the person who brings
yellow light.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, it's
you are.
Oh, I'm not reckless at all. That's the thing.
No, I know you're the there's reckless, and then there's the other end of the spectrum where you're too
where you
cautious.
go 74 and a 70, and you're like, all right, this is good.
Yeah, you're that.
But
guy.
like, have you ever driven with somebody that goes 92 and a 70? Yeah, or like,
me.
And then they're like they make a pass that's a little aggressive, and you like look at it, and you're just like, this is all right, man. Like, this is what we're doing now. Okay, and then you get to the end of the line, and you're like, dude, like, you almost killed us back there. Like, you had to slam on your brakes, and we almost hit the 18-wheeler. And they look at you and go, but did you die?
Yeah.
And then this time you got an fender bender because dude was driving like a jackass. And now it's like, okay, maybe let's reevaluate your driving style. And maybe I'm not saying you have to give it up, but maybe you just fix a little thing. Maybe you just don't.
Me right now, what's going on here?
Nobody's gotten in an accident. I'm just saying that, like, if you were driving 95 and a 70, and I said, hey, Steph, let's slow it down, you could look at me when we get to the Woody and say, Gillis, calm down. We made 10 extra minutes back. Shut up. But if we get in a wreck in the rental car, and I say, hey, Stefan, you were going 90 and a 70, you were 26 miles an hour, and you scraped the barrier, and now there's a paint scrape on the side of the car. It's like, all right, man, let's talk about this. And I think Ohio State has a scrape of paint on the side of their car right now.
So I'll say this. First of all, Gillis is the most conservative driver we know, so he can't be the one.
That was oddly targeted at me.
Yeah,
was not. Which
but
is
here's even more the thing. I'll just say this before we get back on track. The overly cautious drivers are actually the people who cause the most accidents. And I don't have the stats to prove it, but I just
you act like I'm going 45 and a 70.
You might as well be. Okay, here's mine. It's interesting the way that everybody's taking this, and like some of these categories, you guys are going with the coaching and the game plan and the coordinator part, and then some of these other categories, you're going quarterback. And I think it's just so fascinating because those two things work in tandem. I am confident because this is going to be my answer for two different groupings, but for one's more negative and one's more optimistic. It's more optimistic. Is what Indiana did to Julian Sand repeatable from Julian Sand's end of, I think that's the first time I've seen him rattled in a football game. It's because he'd literally never seen it before. Mm-hmm. So now if Miami does it 20 days later, okay, I've seen it before. I know what I'm doing here. That was the first time I was like, oh, he's not poised. He still had a game-winning drive, and his field goal kicker let him down. But it was the first time in a game where I thought he was rattled, and it showed. Some BFF numbers for you. He had 34 dropbacks in this game. When he was kept clean, he was 18 of 22 for a touchdown and 195 yards. He also threw the pick, which was, I don't know, Brandon Ennis took responsibility for that pick, so whatever. When he was under pressure, he was 3 of 7 on 12 dropbacks for 63 yards. And it wasn't even about him getting blitzed. It was just like when they got to him, because he was blitzed on 44.1% of his dropbacks, and he was completing 70% of his passes still, right? It wasn't because Indiana it was just whenever he felt uneasy, it was like a drastic drop, and that happens anyway, right? And for the season, he's completing 83% of his passes when he's kept clean, and he's completing 61% of his passes when he's under pressure. Okay, that's just kind of normal. That's a stark. Everybody has that level of a stark difference. His is just a little bit more stark because he never has an incompletion in a football game. But to go from 82%, which is like where he is typically on the season, to 43% when under pressure. Like almost a 20% difference from where he was on the season to where he was against Indiana in terms of how he operates when he's under pressure. We'd never seen that from Julian Sand before this year. Do I think he's going to do that again? No, because Dave says it all the time. I'll take the body of work over one situation. That if Julian Sand is under pressure again against Miami, which I'm sure there will be some snaps where he's under pressure. Miami's got a good front. I don't think he's only going to complete 40% of his passes. What if it was just 50%? What if he was 10% better? Does Ohio State win that game against Indiana? Probably wins that game. So I'll take what I've seen Julian Sand do for 12 games over what he did in one game against a very, very good football team. Stefan, the thing that makes you nervous about quarterback, offensive coordinator versus defensive coordinator. We also have 10 minutes.
Yeah, I think what makes me nervous is probably Ohio State's offensive line against that defense, right? Because I think Miami, and I have some questions and some uncertainty about Miami's secondary. If Miami with a traditional, 4-man rush can get pressure on Julian Sand in the way that Indiana did, then I have less questions about Miami's secondary and kind of what they can do. So I think that's the matchup that's going to tell us everything, right? Because it felt like that Indiana game was an outlier, a bit of an anomaly for Ohio State's offensive line and the way that they played all year, right? Like, think about the Michigan game, the way that they dominated, up front with their offensive line against Michigan's defensive front. If Rueben Bain and those guys can kind of create pressure, traditional 4-man rush, it gives me a little bit of uncertainty. So I hate when we come on these pods and it's like, it's going to be decided in the trenches and like offensive line versus defensive line is going to decide the game. But like, I'm a little uneasy about Ohio State's offensive line in that Indiana game, right? Because Tegra Shabola has become the scapegoat, I think, for a lot of people when they talk about Ohio State's offensive line issues at times. We can't pretend like Phillip Daniels and Carson Hinsman and Luke Montgomery played terrific games against Indiana either, right? Like
am I allowed to cut you off?
Go.
Simply just because we're going to do an offensive line, defensive line part of this segment. So if like a lot of yours is based on that, I don't want that to get covered up.
I got you. Yeah.
That's all it is.
Yeah. I guess in terms, you're right. More specifically in terms of like quarterback and offensive coordinator, then it would probably be play calling and like personnel packages and things like that. It's like, I don't know, Brian Hartline and / Ryan Day, keep Cardinal Tate and Jeremiah Smith on the field.
Gillis.
Yeah, I mean, it's you're playing a race where you're running a race with somebody who wants to run it 50 miles an hour, and then Ohio State probably should run it 100 miles an hour, and that is I think the concerning thing, right? It's like, I know we're not going to do specifically a special teams thing, but like playing for field goals is probably not the way that Ohio State wants to play this game, right? Because like, I mean, think about some of the drives that they had against Indiana, and like in that second half specifically, like those were long, clock chewing, massive, just move down the field drives that ended in a 4th down stop and then the missed field goal. And it's like, forget the 0 points that Ohio State got out of it. If Ohio State gets 6 points out of that, like if they just kick the field goal both times, forget win or lose, those situations are wins for Miami, right? Those things are wins because all of a sudden you just went from, hey, it's 3-0 Ohio State with 3 minutes left in the second quarter and Ohio State gets the ball first, or 3 minutes left in the first quarter and Ohio State gets the ball first. They go on a 9-minute drive, and then all of a sudden there's 9 minutes left in the second quarter. It's 6-0. And it's like Ohio State has dominated Miami. Miami went 3 and out, and Ohio State has X amount of yards and blah, 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 blah. And Ohio State's just playing too conservatively. So it's the play calling. Is insert play caller name here going to be aggressive? Is whoever that is, and is the game plan going to be, let's let this thing rip? Because Stefan wasn't here yet, but I remember I was texting some stuff out from Ryan Day's radio show before the Notre Dame game in 23. And Ryan Day said, we're going to let it rip. And that was the first time he'd said that since the Georgia game the year before in the Peach Bowl in the college football semifinal. And it was 3-0 at halftime. And it felt like Ohio State was playing scared. And it felt like Ohio State was trying to win a specific way. You cannot do that. So the play calling is I think, that has me nervous, just because the last time we saw it, it's kind of the same thing. It's like, hey, they lost. And that gives me confidence that they'll fix it. But the last time we saw it, they didn't fix it. So that's what has me nervous, is like the play calling and the overall aggressiveness of the offense.
So Miami is 53.57% defensively in terms of teams scoring red zone touchdowns. That's 29th in the country. This is going to be the 5th team Ohio State has played this year who had a red zone defense who was top 30 in the country in allowing red zone touchdowns. Ohio State converts 66.67% of its red zone tips into touchdowns. That's tied for 35th in the country that's tied with Kentucky for 35th in the country. This makes me nervous. It makes me very, 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 very nervous. Here are the 15 trips they have had against top 30 defenses in the red zone this year. And those top 30 defenses are Indiana was number 1, Washington's number 13, Ohio and Michigan were tied for 17th. So let's start with Ohio, because that was the first game of the bunch. 6 trips, 3 field goals, 2 touchdowns, and a turnover on downs. Washington, 5 trips, 3 touchdowns, a field goal, and a turnover on downs. Michigan, 3 trips, 2 field goals, 1 touchdown. Congratulations. At least you get points out of all of them that time. Indiana, as Gillis mentioned, 4 trips, a field goal, a touchdown, a missed field goal that would have tied the game, and a turnover on downs earlier in the game. So 3 of those 4 times, they got to the red zone and put up a donut. And a lot of other times, just field goals. 7 touchdowns in 15 trips. It's 46.7% of your red zone trips against top 30 defenses that you are turning into touchdowns. So you drop 20% from where you are just typically. If I added in everybody, 13 games, 66.6% drops down to 46.7% when you're playing against top 30 red zone defenses. And what are they about to play in the Cotton Bowl? A red zone defense. And what is Miami going to do? Everybody knows Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate are dangerous down the field. They're not going to be the first team who decides, oh, let's just play single high all game, because you're an idiot. If you play press man single high against Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith, Julian Sand's going to have 500 passing yards. Ohio State's got to execute in the red zone. Like, they 46% of your red zone visits ending in touchdowns is going to lose you the football game. In a world where none of us are talking right now like we think Ohio State can lose the football game, I'm telling you right now, if they are as bad in the red zone at converting touchdowns and those trips into for those touchdowns, if they don't get touchdowns in the red zone, we are going to be going, how the heck did Ohio State lose to Miami? Because you're flirting. You're flirting. That's what happened against Indiana. They flirted with death. Indiana was just good enough to take advantage of it. And we'll talk about it tomorrow, whether or not we think whether Miami is good enough to take advantage of it the way that Indiana was, because Indiana is the only team on this list so far who has been able to take advantage of it. But they're also the only team who was good enough coming into this game to take advantage of it. So we'll see. But you are opening the door for anything if you don't convert those trips into touchdowns. And that makes me nervous, because we're 13 games into this. What do we expect? We just expect Ohio State to turn into an elite red zone team when it comes to touchdowns? That's not what they do. And this is not the first time they've been on this path before. Ryan Day's first playoff game, they struggled to score touchdowns in the red zone against Clemson in the Fiesta Bowl. So this is not a new thing for Ohio State. And so it's a flaw. It's an inherent flaw. And it's already cost you one game. Can it cost you another? Can it cost you your season, essentially? Biggest X factors. I'll go first here. Does Ohio State actually trust Julian Sand? Because they keep saying they do. They keep, in hindsight, going, man, we could have gave him more. Man, we could have gave him more. We're here now, man. It's time to give that kid the keys to the car and let him drive it. And if they let him drive the car, I think he's going to be able to do what CJ and Justin did in these types of environments. I know everybody points to CJ's game against Georgia. That ain't the first time CJ did that. It was just the time that everybody was paying attention. He literally did it the year earlier in the Rose Bowl, where him and a first-round wide receiver were playing catch-all afternoons. That was not the first time Justin did it against Clemson in the Sugar Bowl. It's just the time when all eyes were on them. I'm done with the let's bring Julian Sand along slowly and not put too much on his plate. The dude finished 4th in the Heisman Trophy voting, and quite frankly might have finished 1st had Jaden Fielding made a field goal and they won the game in overtime. So can we stop holding Julian Sand's hand and let him go be what we all think he is going to be? You don't need to protect him anymore. He looks like a quarterback who is ready to win you a football game. Go let him do it. That's my biggest X factor. Stefan and Gillis, I left you two with 30 seconds each. So Stefan, go.
Yeah, I guess I won't echo too much. I think my biggest X factor is red zone, right? And what the play calling specifically in the red zone is for Ohio State's offense.
Mm-hmm.
I think if they stay with the Indiana approach, then it's not going to bode well for them, right? And it's so funny, like we're having these conversations. Like Ohio State could probably play the Indiana game plan and still find a way to win against Miami, right? Because the conversation we're going to have about whether Miami is good enough to take advantage of some stuff the way that Indiana did. But it's like, I don't know. I think what Ohio State does against Miami kind of sets the tone for maybe what they're going to do the rest of the playoff and the way that they're going to approach it. So to not echo too much of what you had said earlier about red zone, I think that's the X factor. What does Ohio State's offense do in terms of play calling, right? I'm not even talking about execution. In terms of play calling in the red zone and making sure that it's putting Julian Sand in the best spot possible to convert on those red zone trips.
Gillis, 30 seconds, go.
Yeah, I think it's the aggressiveness. It's like how aggressive is Ohio State going to be? There's something that I really want to touch on in this next topic, which I will kind of leave for, receivers versus the DBs, but like, how aggressive are they going to be? Are they going to say, hey, we can just kind of boa constrictor this game? So yeah, I look at it and I think that if they're not aggressive, they're not going to win the football game. So that to me is the biggest X factor.
And now we'll take a break. Good job, guys. We kept it under 35 minutes, and we're going to do the same thing here when we talk wide receivers, tight ends, and DBs after this on Buckeye Talk.
Oh, Hilton stay, your beds are soft and cozy. No lumpy couch, no stiff futon, no shower line at crack of dawn. Oh, Hilton stay, our holiday you're saving.
When you want holiday comfort you can count on, it matters where you stay. This season, enjoy spacious, comfortable rooms and friendly service when you book with Hilton instead. Hilton for the stay.
This episode is brought to you by McAfee.
Finish your fantasy lineup?
No, but I'm joining this paid group chat with insider info.
Dude, seriously? Forward it to me. Security alert from McAfee. That group's as legit as that knockoff jersey you're wearing.
McAfee's scam detector is available in all McAfee plans for as little as $39.99 for your first year. Learn more at McAfee.com/online protection.
And we're back here on Buckeye Talk. Stephen Means, Stefan Krajisnik, and Andrew Gillis. Same questions, but now we're just focused on the perimeter guys. That's the wide receivers, it's the tight ends, it's the cornerbacks, and the safeties. 35 minutes. Andrew, you're up first. The clock has officially started. Who has the edge?
It's Ohio State. Ohio State has the edge over everybody at receiver and tight end versus DBs. It's just a matter of will they use it. Like, I don't think they utilized it properly against Indiana. I think that was one of the reasons why that they lost. It's Ohio State to me. They've got the best receiver in college football in Jeremiah Smith. They've got one of the best receivers in college football in Carnell Tate. I think Brandon Inniss is like a fine third option, but like, how many teams is Brandon Inniss the number 2 guy that you're like, hey, we got to focus on him in the game plan because he's their number 2 weapon? And like, you said earlier, Stephen, like how many times has Miami just played a team that's turnover prone, not they're forcing turnovers? Okay. How many times has Miami played a receiver like Carnell Tate, let alone JJ? Like,
I mean, Texas A&M's receivers.
Florida has some talent at receiver. I know they had some injuries at receiver, so you'll have to forgive me. I don't know who exactly was in or out of the lineup in that game, but like, I don't know. Florida's got talent. Like, I don't know. Like, nobody's really close to like Carnell. So that to me just gives me the confidence that Ohio State has the edge in this. And like, again, I do think highly of Miami's DBs. Like, they have a nickel that played yesterday or on Saturday, Keontae Scott. He came back from injury. He did kind of get beat a lot, 7 receptions for 38 yards, but like, we'll see if that's going to be a factor in what Ohio State does if they're able to go after him. So it's like, are you able to go after the guy who came back from injury and then got kind of picked on a little bit by Marcel Reed? So if Ohio State's able to pick on that guy with Brandon Inniss and Brandon Inniss starts putting some numbers, I think Miami's in trouble.
Stefan, I'm assuming we both retweet that Ohio State has the edge here, so I just want to continue to move the conversation forward. Which side actually needs to be better for their team to win?
I think it has to be Miami's DBs. I think they got to show up and play because you know what Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate can do, and I think we saw, especially with JJ, what I alluded to earlier in the Indiana game of like, he's going to get his. What can you do to limit kind of everyone around that? And I think Max Clare probably fits into this conversation as well. And Will Kessmer kind of fits into this conversation as well. But Miami's DB's got to show up. It's going to be a challenge, and as long as Ohio State, I feel like we're prefacing everything with being like, as long as they use JJ and Carnell, which is not a guarantee, but if they rely on those guys, then yeah, Miami's DB's got to be up for the challenge. I will say, like earlier, I had said that their secondary was more of a weakness on their defense. That's probably more of a testament to just how good they are, up front, how good their front 6, front 7 is, because the secondary is not necessarily bad. Like you mentioned there with Scott, those stats, Gillis, like, yes, he gave up 7 receptions on 8 targets, but also it was like you said, it was 38 yards total. So it's not like he was getting cooked on like big plays over and over again. And the win kind of factored into that, I'm sure, a little bit. Marcel Reed
He also had 2 sacks and forced a fumble in that game, so it wasn't like he was just miserable.
Yeah. Fitzgerald was awesome in that game against A&M. Those guys all got to be up for the test. They got to make life difficult for these receivers and make some looks different for Julian Saint and kind of what he's going to have to face. So, yeah, I put a lot on Miami's secondary in the way that they're able to contain Ohio State's receivers as best as they can.
This conversation, because there's the obvious answer and then there's the like, are we sure part of this conversation? And I feel like this conversation is very similar to the discussion we've had on multiple times of which room is actually better on Ohio State's roster. It's tight end room or it's wide receiver room. And I just think you hear it and you go, it's wide receivers, duh. Look at what they have. It's like, are we sure, based on the way Ohio State has run its offense this year, that they think that the wide receivers are better than the tight end? Yes, the top 2. If you ranked everybody, it's like 6 tight ends and like 13 wide receivers on the roster. If you ranked everybody, number 1 and number 2 would be Jeremiah Smith and Cardinal Tate. But are we sure that 3 through 6 aren't the tight ends? As a collective unit, they're better. This is where I want to talk about the Miami defensive, their passing defense. Miami's passing defense, 6 yards per attempt. It's tied for 10th with like 7 other teams nationally. Meanwhile, Ohio State, obviously 9.3 passing yards per attempt. That's tied for 7th with Ole Miss in the country. And the thing is, Miami's tied for 10th is not fake. They've played some really good passing offenses this year. Notre Dame, and it finished year 3rd. But again, they got CJ Carr in year 1 and round 1, literally week 1. So it's like, it's impressive what they were able to do to CJ Carr, but would they be able to do that to CJ Carr right now? That's the conversation. Ohio State knows that conversation. There were some things that Oregon was able to do to Ohio State in 2021 against CJ Stroud in his second game as a starter. And you were going by November. Could they still do that to CJ Stroud now? And I think that's the conversation that I think the committee kept trying to have. They were just doing a very terrible job of having the conversation with the way that they talked about Notre Dame and Miami. Florida State was 11th nationally. South Florida was 13th nationally. Texas A&M was 26th nationally. So those are the top 30. And then inside the top 50, SMU was 38th, Pittsburgh's 43rd, and NC State is 48th. So I'm going to say Miami's passing defense is unproven. Meanwhile, Ohio State, their top 50 passing defenses they've played this year, Washington's 18th, Indiana's 18th, Michigan's 27th, Illinois was 38th, Texas is 48th, and Penn State was 48th. Those 2 disappointing teams. Just like pathetic, man. You're supposed to be in the top 10. I think Ohio State's wide receivers and tight ends actually have to be better for Ohio State to win because it's the engine of the offense. And when I say that, it's because it's not just one guy. Because JJ had an awesome game against Indiana. He was 8 for 144. Carnell 4 for 45 and a touchdown. It's good. It's okay, but it's not. It was not the Penn State game, right? Max Clare, who again, kudos to Gillis, man. He was on it. Over 30 in 12 games. He's up to 43 after 13 games, but he had 41 going into the Big Ten championship game. So kudos to Gillis again. 2 for 28 against Indiana. So, and again, this goes into what you guys were talking about in the first segment of like how much of this is play calling and how much of this is please stop taking 17 and 4 off the field. But it's Ohio State's going to win a national championship because of Julian Sand, Jeremiah Smith, and Carnell Tate, and then sprinkling in Max Clare, Will Kazmarek, and Brandon Ennis, and then maybe even Bo Jackson as a receiving threat. In fact, I think he might get a few more catches over the next 3 games before Ohio State wins a national title, like a significant amount. I think we might see that go up. But they have to go actually use them because what's the point of having Carnell on the field if you're only going to let him touch the ball 4 times? Like, yeah.
I know we've talked a lot about receiver depth this season and maybe a lack thereof compared to what we thought. Does going into the playoff, does that not, like, I'm not too concerned about that at this point. Like, at this point, it's like Carnell and JJ and Brandon Ennis are playing all the snaps. Yeah. Right? Like, I don't care what you think about Bryson Rodgers or Mylan Graham or Quincy Porter and where they are in terms of health and development. It's like depth doesn't matter until someone goes down at this point.
Right. Like, if one of those 2 gets hurt again and they can't play for the rest of the postseason, then like we're all going to shift gears and say Ohio State can't win a national title.
That's a whole different conversation.
I think the depth conversation, if this game was getting played the week after Indiana, I think we'd be having that conversation still. But they played that game on December 2nd or 1st or whatnot, and this game's on December 31st. Those 2 had 30 days to sit around and get healthy.
Yeah.
If Ohio State plays 67, let's put it this way. If Ohio State plays 67 offensive snaps on December 31st. Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate better be out there for at least 65. I'll say 61 each. I get it. There's personnel grouping wise, but no more than 6 snaps should Carnell or JJ not be on the field. Individually, like 61 for Carnell, 61 or JJ and above. You get lower than that, I'm going to go knock on the door. I'm not actually going to do these things, but I'm going to go knock on the door with my shirt on that says throw the ball. And I'm going to have another one in my hand, and I'm going to give it to Brian Hartline and Billy Fessler. And I'm going to say that's all.
And Ryan Day.
Well, no, he'll be on the field, so I can't get to him as easy. Yeah, those two will be in the press box. I'll give him an extra one for Day. How about that? I'll give him an extra one for Day. Because then when they go down to halftime, Brian or Billy can give it to Ryan Day to wear for the rest of the game. Do you think Hartline, as a representation. I was going to say, go ahead.
I was going to say, do you think Hartline stays in the press box if he's not calling plays?
These are questions that we will or will not have answers to by the time people actually hear this pod, but because we're doing this Sunday, we don't have the answers to. I think so, yeah. I think for the sake of routine and how they're doing things, they'll probably just keep him up there. Because I still think he'll be involved. I just don't think he'll be the guy pressing the button anymore. I think Ryan Day is going to be calling plays. But I think Hartline's involvement in that will still be what it has been. Just it has the final say versus for the first 12 games. It's like Hartline has the final say, and if Day wants to veto it, he can veto it. What makes you nervous? Or I guess we can do nervous and confident at the same time with this one, Stefan.
Yeah, I think what gives you confidence is that I think Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate are two of the 5, 10 best receivers in the country. So that gives me confidence there. I think what gives me nerve is, I don't know. I keep wanting to bring it back to play calling, like, hey, keep those guys on the field. Keep those guys on the field. Let those guys play. But I think there is an element, too, of what you were talking about, Stephen, of like, when they're on the field, they have to step up, right? And I think that's maybe where I have some questions is Jeremiah and Carnell, I know they'll get theirs, but who's going to step up alongside them, right? Like Max Clare has been good this year. Has he been as consistently, a weapon as you would maybe hope? As Brandon Inniss as consistently a weapon as much as you would hope? And I think that's maybe where you get some hesitation. So I think where I have kind of nerve / concern, however you want to label it, is like who is going to step up alongside those guys? Because I think sometimes you have teams where it's like the rotation of like who's going to be the guy that steps up alongside the stars. It's like it can be a different guy every week. Yeah. Ohio State hasn't necessarily like given us that. It's kind of consistently been a lack of consistency from whoever the third weapon is going to be for a game. So that's where where I have some concern. Where it's like, I don't know, could Miami go into this game and say, hey, we know JJ is going to get his, we know Carnell is going to get his, but if we shut everything else down, we're going to be fine. And that's maybe where I have some hesitations of like, Miami could maybe expose some things, but also like if we're talking, in terms of the college football playoff as a whole, it's like, you don't think there's a team that can say, hey, those two guys are going to do what they do, but if we shut down everything else, then we're going to win this game. And that's maybe where I have a little bit concerned of like, who's going to step up alongside Jeremiah and Carnell. And I think you point to Max Clare and Brandon Inniss as being the two most obvious candidates, but they got to do it, man. It feels like, does it feel like Brandon Inniss is going to kind of have to have a game at some point in these playoffs, right? If Ohio State's going to win it all, like, is there a game where it feels like, and I don't mean like he's going to have like 200 yards. I mean, it might not even be 100 yards, but like if Brandon Inniss gives you 3 catches for 50 yards and a touchdown, like it feels like that's kind of got to happen at some point if they're going to win it all. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but we'll see.
I think so far it's more of a moment for me. More of a moment than a game. It's like Brandon Inniss finishes with like 3 catches for 31 yards, and 18 of them came on a 3rd and 11 play when they're down by 4 late in the game. Something along those lines. Like the G. Scott play against Texas, where we were like, hey, that play really set him up for something big.
I think he's been reliable when they've thrown him the ball. Like he's had some big 3rd down catches over the last month. I feel like it's just his usage is not nearly as high, and we've discussed that at nauseam. At this point, I wrote about it earlier this year about how weird it's been that Ohio State's not using its star receiver. I mean, against Penn State, he has 4 for 41. Is that not a reasonable thing to do? It's the only other game where he had more than 30. Was Washington. He was 3 for 34 against UCLA. He was 6 for 30. So it was a lot of short stuff, and then like it was like just short stuff where I think UCLA also just played a lot of zones, so there wasn't a lot of wiggle room to do stuff after the catch, which was a little disappointing because I felt like that UCLA game, especially once JJ went down, that game and the Rutgers game, him having a combined 8 catches for 40 yards was maybe a little underwhelming because you thought maybe, okay, here's the game where it's going to be the Brandon and Max Clare show, and it didn't necessarily pop that way. But Gillis, confident and nervous. What you got?
The thing that gives me confidence, I have eyes. I can watch Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate play football, and they're the best tandem in college football, and I don't think anybody's keeping up with them. And I don't think Miami has not only the guy to stop them, I don't think they have like the depth to stop them either. So that's the positive, right? Like if you use them, they will be good.
If you build it, they will come.
Yeah, literally. The thing that makes me nervous is, and I'm going to say this without trying to bleed too much into the next segment, but I wonder how much time Miami's corners and safeties are going to have to hang on. Like, little teaser, I don't think Julian Sand's going to be able to make breakfast back there and have all the time in the world to just dice him up. I think Miami is going to recognize what you have to do, and I think Miami has the horses for that. So the thing that would make me nervous, and again, I'm not trying to bleed into another segment here, would be if Sands under pressure, that makes your job as a defensive back a heck of a lot easier. Because if a quarterback is on the run, that might make him less accurate. If Julian's rolling to his left and he's got to throw it into a tighter window.
Can I challenge you? What is less accurate? And for a guy who's completing 78% of his passes.
What happened against Indiana?
Do you actually think that is based on what we have?
I kind of think it's possible to repeat that.
Okay.
I kind of think it's possible to repeat that. Like, I kind of think that, like, because again, we're going to get into the names and stuff soon. I kind of think that the horses that Miami has are enough to just make things uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And then, hey, look, we run, tight coverage, and Julian might throw for a lot of yards, like you were saying, but Miami also, I'm fascinated by how they play this game because, we'll bump and run and we'll challenge them and we're not going to back down from a fight. Okay, Julian throws for 350, Julian throws for 375, but Miami's probably looking at it going, if we get 2 picks out of that, that's cool. We'll live with 370 and 2 picks. Like we'll live with jump balls if he has to throw them because JJ's going to win a few. He can go up and make Hail Mary catches that are just ridiculous, and that's fine. But the more of those, the better, because if gun to your head, you're saying throw it up in coverage, throw it up with a corner on him and a safety coming over the top, rather than innocent a 15-yard in or Tate along the sideline where nobody's around him. Like you'd rather the jump ball stuff, and if they make the play, they make the play. But that would be the thing that would kind of make me a little uneasy about Ohio State's passing attack is that if Miami's front does what is possible for that front, things can get easier for for Miami's DBs. And then it also changes the way that you want to play the game. Like Ryan Day talked about it in the Indiana game in the post-game press conference where he said we had some shots, like people were asking him about like being conservative. And I think he said we had shots dialed up and we just couldn't take them. And that would concern me as well. Is like if you have to dink and dunk your way down the field, that's what Miami wants. Miami wants those 15-play, 80-yard drives that end, and then hopefully you tighten up when you get to the red zone. That's their goal. So to me, it's how much is the secondary going to have to do? Because if the secondary has to, hang on for 3, 4, 5, 6 seconds, they're toast. It's over.
I always find it fascinating the way you talk about Ohio State's passing game. Because it's like, it shapes how you talk about it and how you view it. Because it's like, I don't know if Julian is he gonna have time to sit back there and survey the field and throw a 40-yard bomb down the field. It's like, that doesn't have to be the passing attack. It doesn't have to just.
I'm not saying it does, but it makes you.
I'm not just talking to you at this point. Like, this is what Brian Hartline's passing attack has been that. And I've been thinking about that ever since he went, I love play action. I love showing the idea of doing something and doing something else. And it's like, yeah, I can see that. Because anytime you guys get between the you play action, throw the ball down the field. And if the protection holds up, more often than not, it hits. If the protection doesn't hold up, then more often than not, it doesn't hit. Or it does hit because Julian Sand is strong enough to stand there in the pocket and take a hit and make a throw. That doesn't have to be what the multiple tight end stuff irritates all of us. I think the thing that irritates me more is it feels like Ohio State's offense for 13 games was very much run the ball on first down. If it's second and short, and we're in between the 40s, we're going to play action and have Jeremiah Smith or Carnell Tate run 40 yards down the field. And it's fine. That's typically when teams take those shots is between the 40s on second and short. Because if you don't hit it, it's third and 1, and you can convert that. And if you don't get yardage on first down and it's 2nd and 7, okay, then you're going to run the ball again, and then it's dropped back on 3rd and 4. And Julian, can you convert on 3rd down? I'm trying to have this conversation a little bit more sophisticated because last year I just started yelling. I'm growing as a podcaster. I'm trying to yell less. I feel like I've yelled less during this episode. Is that fair? I've also just spent Saturday afternoon around my family, so you can't come off of family time and just yell. You can't do that.
Right? Yeah, we also haven't talked about Miami's defensive line yet, so maybe you'll start yelling pretty soon here.
I am who I am at some point, right? I am who I am. I'll say this is the point I was making last year of like, why does that have to be the passing attack? And it feels like that's what it's been this year. I'm looking at Ohio State's average depth of target. Carnell Tate's at 15.1. JJ's at 10.6. And JJ's so much lower than he was last year because teams have obviously defended him in the way it was like, no. You're not getting behind us. And Carnell just goes, okay, I'll get behind you then. Why does Jeremiah only have to get the ball down the field? Why does Carnell Tate only have to get the ball down the field? Why? I don't feel like this passing attack this year has had enough situations where you're just trying to get the ball in their hands and let them make plays. And when they've tried to do it with JJ, I think that's where he had a deep thigh bruise. He had a quad bruise. And that's where it maybe showed up because he didn't have the bursts that I think he had last year to make some of those plays. I don't know. His first touchdown against Oregon wasn't a 40-yard shot. It was a RPO where Howard kept it, rolled out, dumped it to JJ, and JJ went the rest of the way with G. Scott making a key block. Where's that play at? Where's the mesh routes that they used to run against Michigan in 2018 and 2019? Now, I get it. Teams don't play as much man against Ohio State because they know they have a wide receiver. But I don't know. Maybe I just have more respect for the minds in that that offensive staff meeting to just think that the best they can come up with is run the ball on first down. And if you get 2nd and short, we're going to launch it down the field. And if we don't get 2nd and short, then we're going to run it again and then maybe run something on 3rd down and maybe we get it, maybe we don't. If Ohio State plays football that way, then you're right, Gillis. And the competition between the wide receivers and the Miami defensive line of like who can win their one-on-one the fastest is obviously going to be a big factor in this football game. And so I'm not combating it because it's a wrong point. I'm combating the idea of like, why does it have to come down to that? There is not a single way under the sun that should be off the table when it comes to getting 4 and 17 the ball. Well, quite frankly, I'll throw 1 into that in 86. You should be creative. And you've had 30 days to figure out how to do that. So if they come out and their scheme is, well, the only way we can get it to JJ and Carnell is if we throw it 40 yards down the field. It's like, why? That's not – Julian Sand is hitting deep balls at an unrealistic rate. Most coaches will tell you that's a 50%. If you're at 50%, you're elite. The fact that Julian Sand is like 70% on deep shots is just not – that's absurd that he's doing that. But it doesn't have to be everything's outside the numbers. Everything's down the field. I think Julian Sand could be good throwing the ball over the middle of the field at this point in his career. So let's try it. I don't know. The seam's open. If the safety, what Tom Brady said, if the safety comes down, rip the seam. And as our wide receivers get bigger and better, their passing game and the creativity to get the bigger and better wide receivers the ball is dumbed down. And I don't think they should do that. When I say throw the ball, I'm not saying just play action deep shot. I'm saying be creative. Get Julian Sand out the pocket a little bit. Run away from Rueben Bain, right? Make those defensive linemen think. Because, yeah, if it's 3rd and 6, of course Rueben Bain is just going to tee off on you. That's what he did to Marcel Reed. Texas A&M was living in 3rd and long and then going, hey, Marcel, can you be a savior for us? No, I'm 6 foot and 170 pounds, dude. I can't run away from this dude forever. Are you serious? That's insane. Be creative. If I'm confident that 30 days of prep, it's not going to be basic. I'm nervous that 30 days of prep where Brian Hartline spent 10 of those days putting together a staff for his new job means it's more of the same. Because you're right, Stefan, you learn more from a loss, but also when you can chalk up a loss to if we make a field goal, it's a different ball game. That's called stubbornness, and coaches can be a little stubborn and go, well, if we just fix this one thing, everything else was great. It's like, no, all of it sucked. So find a million different ways. Average depth of target is an interesting stat to me because a lot of times it just tells you like how far they are away from when they get the ball thrown to them. And 15.1 is great. I don't know. I don't think 10.3 for JJ is bad. It just tells me you're being creative because you have to be creative because you know every team has a safety shaded over him because he's JJ. Okay, that doesn't mean stop giving him the football. Do it for everybody. X Factor, Stefan. And we have 8 minutes. We're doing good.
Yeah, and I won't even, I'm not going to do too much here because I talked about it a bit earlier, but the X factor for me is insert receiver weapon number 3. Who's going to step up? Whether it's Max Clare or Brandon Inniss, right? Who's going to step up and give Ohio State, someone alongside those two guys? Because I think one thing that we've made clear on this pod is that we believe and trust that Ohio State is going to lean on Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate and Julian Sayin to be its best weapons in this game. Who is going to step up and like Gillis said earlier, like have a moment, right? Like I think back to last year's run, and it's like whether it was the game at Penn State or whether it was the third down in the national championship game where Brandon Inniss made a play when Ohio State needed him to make a play. Can he give you that again? Obviously, he's in a starter role now as opposed to he was kind of the fourth receiver last year. But can he step up and make a play when you need it, right? On 3rd and 4. And Rueben Bain is right in Julian Sayin's face. Can Max Clare, be a weapon who goes up and makes a play, right? And helps Ohio State convert. So the X factor for me is whoever the third receiving weapon is for Ohio State, right? Can you step up and be that guy when they need you to make a play? Because it feels like whether it's this Miami game or this playoff, there's going to be a third down where someone's going to have to make a play, and it's not JJ or Carnell, and it could be a very crucial moment. And that's where it's time for Brandon Inniss or Max Clare to tell us, hey, I might not be the top target, but when my number's called, I'm ready to make it happen. So that's the X factor for me is insert receiver number 3. And maybe who knows? Maybe it is Mylan Graham coming in off the bench for a snap. Maybe it is Will Merrick or Bennett Christian, right? Like maybe it is one of those guys who maybe we don't talk about as much, but someone's got to step up and be that third weapon for Ohio State in a crucial play. That's the X factor for me.
Gillis, XO facto.
Same thing. Retweet. Who is going to be the guy that Miami can't cover? You can't double cover everybody. Very simple.
Like, challenge accepted. To try to double cover everybody. So I'm going to talk about JJ and Carnell some more, because why not? I don't think you can ever talk about those two too much. When those two played against Michigan, do either of you have a moment during that game where you maybe if you were on edge about just how healthy they were? What moment in the game did you finally kind of let out a woo-saw that, okay, like JJ and Carnell are like actually playing and not just like, okay, JJ and Carnell are playing football. Like they're actually out there and they can do what they want with JJ and Carnell.
Am I allowed to say the first 2 snaps of the game?
Yes, you can say that. Okay.
Yeah, the first 2 snaps of the game when Ohio State was like, hey, Michigan, they're healthy. They're fine.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think that's why they did it, right? They literally did. Yeah, so all of us could be like, okay, cool. That was not the moment for me. Because I think it wasn't the moment, but I've been rewatching that game, and it's like, oh, would we not all have done the exact same thing for the first 2 play calls? Like, interception aside, because obviously that weren't the worst case scenario, but like best case scenario, they catch them. The actual like, all right, you're cool with this is you don't catch either one of those, and it's 3rd down, and now we start playing real football. Is there any? I don't know. Would we have done anything different other than send those 2 down the field so like you could show that you have to worry about the thing you think you have to worry about? So for me, in rewatching the game, JJ's route for his touchdown was the moment I calmed down about JJ because like we had been playing football for a little bit. Because that's the thing, JJ. I mean, we were watching him like a hawk at a UCLA game, and then he had the one-handed catch, and we're like, oh well, JJ's healthy. Oh no, it's the second half, and he's been limping around on the sideline for 20 minutes. Maybe he wasn't that healthy. So, and that route, that sluggo seam he had against Michigan was like, it's not an easy route to do. So the fact that he executed that to a T, that's when I was like, okay, JJ's good. Carnell Tate's route, because of when it was in the game and he had been playing for a little bit, I was like, okay, Carnell is good. I think 30 extra days is my X factor. Because even in the Indiana game, I was a little like, okay, you played football last week. You're going to be good for another week? You're going to be good to do this? And I am wondering, as annoyed as we are with some of the 12 personnel and 13 personnel and 14 personnel and them taking Carnell and JJ off the field, if they were only 60 and 70% healthy, were they trying to mitigate it? And unfortunately, they don't have faith in their wide receiver room, so they couldn't mitigate it with Quincy Porter, who was also out. They couldn't mitigate it with Bryson Rogers, who's now in the transfer portal, or Mylan Graham or David Adolph. So they tried to mitigate it by going heavy. If those two had 30 extra days to really sit, they're not trying to work their way back. They're just getting healthy, just like everybody else is. I think the X factor might just be those two are as close to 100% as any human being who has played 13 football games would be at this point. Because that's the thing. Like, they weren't doing all this stuff against Penn State. Were we annoyed with some of the heavy personnel against Penn State? No, because they were mixing in. They were playing quarters. Cool. JJ. You can literally hear Ryan Day. There's one player who's like, go, JJ, go. And then you hear another one where he's throwing to Cardinal. He's like, got him. But it just didn't feel like they could do those things as often as they wanted to do those things, because maybe they were trying to, it's like wear and tear, and they're already like, they're not red, but they're like the burnt orange color. So they're like one hit away before the computer won't let you sub them back in. I felt like maybe they were living in that world the last 2 weeks. And so now that they've had 30 days to really breathe, now they can actually get into the rhythm and do some of the things they want to do, especially if they were just trying to get them to Saturday. They probably weren't getting a lot of reps in practice. So you probably weren't working on those things, because why would we waste this rep here when we're going to need it on Saturday? Now they can do all those things. So for me, my X factor is JJ and Cardinal are healthier than at any point they've been since they played against Penn State, and that's a problem for Miami. Congratulations, guys. We did this with a minute to spare. I'm proud of you guys. I'm proud of myself. We're going to take our final break here, and then we're going to get into the part of the podcast where they think I'm going to start yelling. I am out to prove them wrong here on Buckeye Talk.
This episode is presented by State Farm. Having insurance isn't the same as having State Farm. It's like needing the protection of an offensive guard on the football field, but getting an elementary school crossing guard. Sure, they're both guards, but you can only trust one to keep your quarterback safe when the game is on the line. So don't settle for just any insurance when there's State Farm. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Here's my 30-second story with Guinness. As soon as my sister and I get home for the holidays, we don't even unpack. We head straight to our pub. The bartender already knows our order, Guinness and fries. We laugh all night, catch up with old friends, and walk home with faces sore from smiling. It's one of my favorite nights of the year. That was my 30-second story with Guinness.
Guinness Draft Stout. Please enjoy responsibly. Imported by Diageo Beer Company, USA, New York, New York.
And we're back here on Buckeye Talk. Stephen Means, Stefan Krajisnik, and Andrew Gillis. We're talking Ohio State's offense versus Miami's defense as we start our preparation for the Cotton Bowl on December 31st. The winner will head to the Fiesta Bowl and play the winner between Georgia and Ole Miss. Just give me the Camelback, man. It's so close. I can feel it. Just give me the Camelback. Same questions. We move on to offensive line and defensive line. We all think Miami has the edge unless somebody wants to say differently. Right? Okay, I'm going to take silence as a yes. This is an audio platform, so people can't hear your shaking.
We were nodding our heads.
Okay, cool. People can't hear those things. Which side actually needs to be better for their team to win, Andrew Gillis? And the clock is started.
It's Miami, because this is the area that Miami actually has an advantage over Ohio State. And it's a little similar to the receiver conversation that Steven was bringing up. Like, hey, like Ohio State's receivers have to be better. And I agree with him. It's like, if Ohio State's offensive line wins the battle here, what can Miami put its laurels on? Like, what can Miami say? Yeah, right. Like, what can Miami, well, at least defensively, like, what can Miami say? Well, we're good because we've got X at linebacker and XXX in the secondary and this I don't think they have that. I think we all agree that Ohio State had an advantage at least at receiver, and they certainly have an advantage at quarterback. So it's like, if Miami doesn't win this, they're dead. Like, it's over. And this is probably going to end up on Rueben Bain's Instagram story, but like,
you're going to be in the background of his phone for the next
week. Exactly. Right. But like, I think Miami just can't afford to lose this matchup, because if Ohio State blocks it up, what can't they do? Right. Like, I'm not trying to make it sound like Miami's got a bunch of dudes who are going to play at like Georgia Southern that like are just kind of hanging on and around for the ride. But like, we all agreed Ohio State's got the advantage elsewhere. So like, if Ohio State hangs in at least, like, to me, a draw is a win for Ohio State at the offensive line. They'll never admit that, like they'll never say, well, geez, I hope we can just play a good game against a good opponent and everybody's wonderful. But I hope we just don't lose too badly. I hope it's close. They'll never say that, but I'm going to say that. If Ohio State and Miami come out and you go, you know what? Ohio State, they popped some runs. Rueben Bain got a sack. Mesidor got a sack. Okay, this was actually a pretty good battle. If you like offensive line, defensive play, that was a game for you. That's bad for Miami. Miami's edge here is not two great opponents going up against each other. It's we obliterated that front and we killed Julian Sand.
Yeah,
and that has to be their mode. So Miami has to win. If they don't, sayonara. We're going to the college football semifinal to cover Ohio State.
Stefan, before I bring you in, I want to follow up and ask you this because of the way you just talked about that. Who is under? I think there are two units who they have the edge, and it's not even a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It's Ohio State's wide receivers versus Miami's secondary, and it's Miami's defensive line versus Ohio State's offensive line. I think all the other units we're going to talk about, all the other matchups, whether it's today or tomorrow that we're going to talk about, I think you can have conversations. I think those are the two where it's just not even you're an idiot if you think otherwise. Not idiot, that's a strong word, but you know what I mean. Who is actually under more pressure to have to dominate that, to have to validate that we think it's that much of a gap between them? Ohio State's wide receivers against the secondary, or Miami's defensive line versus Ohio State's offensive line?
Miami's defensive line. This is to me where the game's going to be won and lost, because it's this is the load bearing wall of Miami's entire operation, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit like, when you play Michigan, it's like if you stop the run, you win because they can't throw the ball. It's like, okay, if you stop the pass rush and you can run the ball on them, and they're we're gonna talk about them as pass rushers, and Mesidor and Bain as holy crap, those dudes are really good, and blah 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 blah. Their run defense is also very good, and their interior defensive line is also very good. So it's kind of one of those things where it's Miami has to prove that they have to dominate this. Ohio State, I don't think proving that you can dominate is I mean, it's the goal, but I don't know if it's the end result that would be positive for Ohio State. Proving you can hang with this team in this particular area of the particular area of the game, that's the bigger challenge for Ohio State. So for domination, it's Miami.
Stefan,
I'm going to piggyback off that question and make the point of why I think Ohio State's offensive line is maybe the most important unit in this game, and why they have to. Because if JJ and Carnell and Ohio State's receivers are going to take advantage of the advantage that they have against this secondary, Julian Saint's got to have time to make these plays happen, right? I think back to, Julian missing Innis in the seam in that Indiana game, because they talk about saying having to step up because there's pressure, and then you watch the play, it's no, there wasn't pressure. He thought there was going to be pressure, and there wasn't pressure because it was coming from the right side, and he was uneasy about the right side of the offensive line. So I think it's on Ohio State's offensive line, man. They got to show up, because this is where I think Miami can win. I think we're all going to predict Ohio State to win, and maybe some of us will even predict Ohio State to win by a wide margin, because Ohio State's just that much better than Miami. If Rueben Bain and Mesidor and this defensive front is getting after Julian Sand, Ohio State can lose this game. Its offensive line has to show up, because if it doesn't, then everything about your offense, everything about Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith goes out the window, because those guys aren't making plays down the field if the play doesn't have time to develop. So I'm putting it on Ohio State's offensive line. Miami's defensive line is going to do what it does. It's got a no doubt top 10 NFL draft pick and another dude who's going to probably go pretty highly in the NFL draft. If those two guys do their thing, Ohio State can win. If those two guys do their thing to an exceptional level, then Miami's got a very good chance to win this game. So I put a lot of pressure on Ohio State's offensive line. They got to show up, because if they don't, then it could be a carbon copy of what happened against Indiana.
And it's just Rueben Bain, I think, is the most fascinating dude in this game, because we all know he's a very good football player. Until that first round playoff game, he was a dude who got pressure but didn't get home. On the year before the Texas A&M game, he had 58 pressures and 4.5 sacks. And it's why, and we've had conversations with people on the beat, and it's Rueben Bain has 2 sacks. Why aren't people talking about it this way? And we would all go, because we're watching these football games. This dude is just living in the backfield. But, I mean, until that game, Gillis, what was the difference between Rueben Bain and Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau? they got pressure too and didn't get home. And then all of a sudden in the playoff, they stopped just not getting home. They started getting home. And all of a sudden, JT's got 12 and a half sacks on the year and Jack's got 9 sacks on the year. And they're both making big-time plays in big-time games. And so is that the trajectory that Rueben Bain is about to be on right now, where you had 4.5 sacks the entire year? You had 3 against Texas A&M. And some of his sacks, to be fair, were Marcel Reed trying to do something and trying to do a little too much. Right, he dominated his opponent. I'm not going to sit here and take away from that because, again, like Gillis, I also don't want to be the background, Rueben Bain's photo, and then like if they win this game, he's like, yeah, man, there's these 2 dudes, I don't know, cleveland.com, who were talking crazy about me, and they were writing checks that Ohio State couldn't cash. I'm not writing any checks, but it's just pressure but not getting home doesn't scare me. Because Julian Sand has shown me for most of the season he could handle pressure. The difference, to your point, Stefan, was he got sacked 5 times against Indiana. And I think all those sacks came in the first half. So now he's spending the other 30 minutes. It's different when you actually get hit versus you feel it. When you're just feeling pressure, that's no different than practice. Okay, you pressure me, but you can't hit me, so it's whatever. He had been sacked 6 times coming into the game, and the only game he had been sacked more than once in that outing was against Purdue, where he got sacked twice. So, like, all right, getting pressure doesn't do anything. But if you are hitting me 5 times in 30 minutes, now all of a sudden, as you're talking about, Stefan, Brandon Ennis is opening the seam, but Julian Sand felt phantom pressure, and now he doesn't make the throw. So I agree. I think it is on Miami's off defensive line. For me, I agree with you because they got to get home early. Because if you're just going to get pressure, I think Julian Sand handles pressure well. But listen, you hit me 5 times, and I'm all right with people who are 300 pounds and 6'5". I'm not going to be throwing the ball as well as I was throwing it when they were just running by me and not getting over the hump. So that's why I think it's on Miami's defensive line to establish itself in a way that I think Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate's mere presence already establishes itself, and now they just have to go do it. Like Miami has to go show. They have to show me that what they did against Texas A&M wasn't just because they were playing a quarterback who does kind of get antsy in the pocket and take off before he's supposed to take off, but also tries to make plays, and all of a sudden, like I think Marcel Reed took some bad sacks. I don't think Julian Sand has taken bad sacks this year of his 11 sacks. So that's why I went that way with things. Confident and nervous. What you got for me, Stefan?
Yeah, I'm nervous about Ohio State's offensive line against this Miami defensive line. It's pretty simple. They got some dudes up front, man, that they can create some havoc. So, yeah, I have confidence in Miami's defensive line creating some pressure. I have nerves about Ohio State's offensive line not standing up well against that pressure. It's tough for, like, we've had 2-3 weeks now where we can sit and just think about that offensive line performance against Indiana and how not great it was. And it makes you forget how good Ohio State's offensive line has been most of this season, right? Like I think they probably should have been like finalists for the Moore Award. I thought their offensive line was better than like Michigan's, So you have to have good rushing numbers for your offensive line to get recognized in awards like that. And I get it, Ohio State didn't have great rushing numbers, but that is, yes, that's the lasting impression, and maybe it's a bit of an outlier, but also it's a lasting impression because that was the best defensive front you probably faced this season. And Miami is right up there with Indiana in terms of the pressure that they can create and things of that nature. So yeah, this entire matchup, Ohio State's offensive line against Miami's defensive line, gives me a lot of pause.
Gillis, confidence and nerves.
Yeah, I would say my nerves for Ohio State are pretty self-explanatory. Miami's really good. They've got some talented players that are not, Akeem Mesidor and Rueben Bain. Justin Scott, for those of you that remember that name, he was an Ohio State commit one time. He rotates in at defensive tackle. David Blay is a really good defensive tackle for them. Like they've got guys up the middle that can just be cloggers, if you will, that will just say, you know what, like, okay, all they got to do is get in the way. Here's the thing, though, that I do want to offer some semblance of just like what I don't want to do is make this sound like this is David versus Goliath, because like Ohio State does have a really good, like I think they have a solid base. I'm not gonna say really. I think they're solid. I think what has happened is the right side of the offensive line has deteriorated a little bit. I think Tegra has been just up and down all year. I think it's kind of the same for Phillip Daniels. Like I think Phillip Daniels had kind of just started to slowly not really build on his performances throughout the beginning of the year. And I just think there was kind of a slow downtick for him. Stefan brought it up a few times. Like Luke Montgomery had some games where you went, I don't know what's going on there. So that's, I think, the negative. But I think the positive for Ohio State is simply they've done this before. Do you know how many hurries Colin Simmons was credited against with Ohio State?
Yep.
0. Do you know how many hurries that Ethan Burke was credited against with Ohio State? 0. Texas had 4 total hurries that game, and they had 0 sacks. So the question then becomes, who do you like better as players? Rueben Bain and Akeem Mesidor at edge, or Colin Simmons and Ethan Burke at edge? I think that's an interesting debate. I think that's an interesting point to bring up. So that gives me confidence, is that, like, I think Austin Sierrafeld's probably going to be fine. Like, I think Austin Sierrafeld's going to be okay. Like, I don't think Austin Sierrafeld is walking into this game and we're like, oh God, dead man walking, he's screwed. Like, I think Sierrafeld's gonna hang up there, and it's basically like, is that right side of the offensive line gonna hold in? So yeah, like, there's reasons to be confident with Ohio State. They've done it before. You've seen it before. You've seen them go up against good edge rushers before. They did it the entire playoff last year, where they played Tennessee and we were like, man, there's like dudes on that defensive line. They're NFL dudes, and these James Pierce, and they've got all these like rotational guys that they're moving in, and like this could be tough. And then they were fine, and they were in worse shape health wise than they are now. So that to me is confidence. It comes down to like the one-on-one matchups, and I think what Miami's defense saw from Indiana. Because it's one thing to just say, Rueben Bain, go win. Akeem Mesidor, go win. And maybe Rueben Bain just eats Phillip Daniels' lunch one-on-one. But if Indiana gave you the script of, like, if you confuse them, you can cause havoc, that to me would be the interesting part of this, is like, what lessons has Ohio State learned, and how did the offensive line get better from that Indiana game? So there's reasons that, like, if you want to look at a glass half full, there's reasons for people to say, you know what, I think they'll be okay. At least okay enough to win the game. And I think there's also reasons to say, I'm pretty nervous about this. I'm pretty worried about what's going to happen on December 30th.
You guys are worried about becoming Rueben Bain's lock screen. I don't want to become Phillip Daniels' lock screen there, Gillis.
Yeah, exactly. And like, again, they've done this before. Like, they've blocked good edge rushers before and completely shut them down.
I think the thing that makes me most confident is Tegra Shabola won't be the starting right guard for the college football playoff. I'm going to say that with a lot of confidence. Like, he's not going to start. He's got an injury thing going on. But also, even if he didn't have an health thing going on, he wasn't going to be the starter for that right guard for the college football playoff. I haven't yelled yet, by the way. I'm also confident in that. And again, is what Indiana did repeatable? Because sure, Andrew, Indiana did what they did. Miami doesn't have the same scheme as Indiana. Part of the reason Indiana was able to do that is because they have some really, really good linebackers, man. And so they were like, that's not just a defensive. What Indiana did wasn't just because their defensive line was good. It's because their entire front seven is that good. Plus their secondary is pretty solid. I think Miami's front guys with their hand in the dirt are very, very elite. That is the only part of Miami's defense I will apply that to. But it's so elite, and they played in the ACC, that sometimes that's all that you need, right? In 2019, quite frankly, that defense was awesome. It also had Chase Young and Jeff Okudah sitting down one side of the field. And so all of a sudden, the other 9 players who are starting look pretty good when Chase Young is saying hello to the quarterback, and the quarterback just got the ball in his hands after the snap. So is that actually repeatable for another team to be able to do, especially when they actually don't have 10 days? They have less than 10 days. Like I said this earlier, they have the least amount of time to prepare for their next opponent because of when they played their last game versus when they're going to play their next game. And again, it's like it's one of those things that's nothing, but win or lose, you're either going, man, they did that with less prep time, or you're going, man, well, we had a little less prep time, so that's why we lost the game. Like, someone's going to use that as a thing somewhere. Right? It's not going to be me. But is it actually repeatable? I don't think so, because if it was, Indiana wouldn't have been the first team to do it. Penn State's got a pretty good defensive line. Their team was sucked, but their defensive line was good, and they didn't do it. I think Colin Simmons is still the best edge rusher they'll face this year, and that's including Rueben Bain. And Colin Simmons didn't do anything. So yeah, I don't know if it's repeatable. The thing I'm nervous about is that Tegra Shabola is not going to be the starting right guard, and we might find out why he's been the starting right guard. Because that's the thing. Everybody wants Tegra Shabola benched, and I'm with you. We've all wanted Tegra Shabola benched for a while, but there's a reason he's continued to be the starter. It's the same thing with Jaden Fielding at kicker. It's like there's a reason Jaden Fielding keeps being the guy they're putting out there. Should they? No, but they think that's the best option they have. So what does that tell you about what they think about the other options? No, Gabe Van Sickles had 30 extra days. Josh Padilla, for all I'm concerned about, he's pretty healthy at this point, and so we'll see what happens. I think there is a world that exists that if Josh Padilla doesn't get hurt against Penn State, he probably would have taken that job from Tegra Shabola during the UCLA and Rutgers games, maybe, I guess. Gabe Van Sickle, I think, hasn't looked bad, so now he's in that mix as well, so that changes some things. But still, until you see it, it's got to make you a little bit nervous that the guy who's been the starter the last 2 years and hasn't always looked great when he's needed to look great is going to be a new guy there who's never done this before. But also to Gillis's point, Luke Montgomery had never played in this role before, and he was a second-year guy, and they threw him out there, and he played perfectly fine. So
yeah, that kind of goes into my X factor. My X factor here is Ohio State's right guard, whether it's Padilla, whether it's Van Sickle, whoever it is, but stepping in there, make life a little easier for Phillip Daniels, right? Because I agree with Gillis. It has been up and down at times for Phillip Daniels this year, right? And I think some of his best football came early in the season, and then maybe there's been some inconsistency since then. But his job becomes a little bit easier if the right guard is pretty consistent too, right? Like if it's Gabe Van Sickle or Josh Padilla stepping in there, getting some level of consistent good play from the right guard makes Phillip Daniels' life a little easier. It makes Carson Hinsman's life a little bit easier. It makes Julian Sayan's life a whole lot easier if he's not thinking about pressure from the right side. So that's my X factor is whoever steps in at right guard. We've talked a lot of can Tegra Shabola's struggles be the reason Ohio State doesn't win a national championship? I think against Indiana we saw that. Sure, he wasn't entirely to blame for those offensive struggles, but it makes a pretty big impact if your right guard is not playing well. So whoever steps in there, that's my X factor for this game. If Van Sickle or Padilla can help slow down that Miami defensive line, then I don't think Ohio State's going to have much trouble winning this game.
Yeah, my X factor's similar. I went a little broader. I just said Ohio State's interior because if we get to the end of the game and Mesidor and Bain, because I don't want to leave Mesidor. Everybody's going to talk about Bain, and maybe it's just because he has the cool name and everybody thinks
Mesidor had 11 pressures against Texas A&M. 11 pressures. Yeah. That's
so
crazy.
I super don't want to just make this seem like, oh, well, it's just they have this one first round pick guy. No. Mesidor's good. If you get to the end of the game and let's say they combine for 2.5 sacks, Mesidor and Bain. We did this with Abdul Carter and Donovan Jackson, where we were Donovan Jackson gave up 2 sacks, but that's fine. We were that's cool. Sure, it didn't matter. But they also blocked everything else up really well. Where this gets dicey for Ohio State is, I mentioned Blay. They have Justin Scott rotating in. Ahmad Moten, I believe I'm pronouncing that right. Those are guys that have been able to get after the quarterback well. Moten, 4.5 sacks. Armando Blunt, 2.5 sacks. Justin Scott feels like he's played a bigger role as the year has gone on. So it's if Ohio State's interior line holds up and they block well against Miami's interior, I think you're going to leave that game and go, you know what? Yeah, Mesidor was good and Bain was good. And yeah, there was that really annoying 1st and 10 sack that Mesidor had that made it 2nd and 17. And what they were at the 25, and then they had to kick a field goal, and oh no. Well, I think Ohio State still wins the game in that aspect, right? So if Ohio State's interior offensive line doesn't block well, I think this is on Luke Montgomery, Carson Hinsman, and whatever is going to happen at right guard, whether rotation, whatever. That to me is big. Because I trust Sierreveld to hang in there. Daniels is more of a question mark, but I trust Sierreveld, and it's you know what? If you trust Sierreveld, you can chip that a lot easier at the edge. You can, maybe there's a big Will Kazmarek game, but you can chip that a lot easier if hey, they got Mesidor against Sierreveld and Sierreveld's winning that matchup, but Mesidor's killing him on the right. Okay, well, you can chip that a lot easier than Luke Montgomery's getting destroyed by Justin Scott, right? That's a heck of a lot easier to fix on the edge than in the interior. Plus, then you can't run the ball. If Miami's interior defensive line is just killing you, that takes away the run threat. that lets Miami say, you know what, we don't need to worry about the run. We can just drop 7 every play because we're getting home with 4. It changes the whole math here. So how Ohio State's interior offensive line plays, to me, can be a real big deciding factor, because I don't think it's crazy that we get to the end of this game and go, you know what, they're good, and Ohio State was able to handle the rest of it.
So Philip Daniels has given up 15 pressures this year and 2 sacks. His sacks came against UCLA and then the one against Indiana, which was like really bad. That was bad. 15 pressures. He only gave up 2 to Indiana, though. 6 of his 15 pressures came against Wisconsin. You know, the game where Ohio State threw the ball 45 times. I think that's the worst game of his career here, and the PFF numbers showed 40.6 overall grade, 30.6 pass blocking grade. That's the only time he's been below 56 on the year, and he's actually just been pretty solid. Outside of that, I think he's the X factor. And we've been seeing it. He's had like a knee brace on underneath the typical metal knee braces that offensive linemen wear for a lot of the back half of the season. So again, some of this is just simply, Ohio State didn't have to play football for 30 days, so some guys can get healthy here. I think he's fine. I rewatching the game, Indiana did some stuff. And remember last year when not last year, in 2023, Gillis, when Donovan Jackson wasn't at his best, and it's because he was playing between Carson Hinsman, who was a first-year starter, and then Josh Simmons, who wasn't yet like the version of Josh Simmons that we thought could be a first-round draft pick. And it just like impacted how good Donovan Jackson was that year. I'm wondering if his Tegra got actively worse throughout the year. And then you started throwing in Josh Padilla. Ethan and Yawa was rotating with Tegra in week 1. And Gabe Van Sickle. I just wonder how much of what was going on at right guard was impacting what Philip Daniels was doing, mixed with him not being 100% healthy. So if you gave him 30 days off, and I guess let's mark it down right now. Stefan, who starts, Gabe Van Sickle or Josh Padilla?
I'll go with Gabe Van Sickle.
Okay. Gillis?
I think Gabe.
Okay. So if you both think Gabe is going to start, do we think that Gabe Van Sickle is getting 80% or more of the first team reps right now? Or is that too high or too low?
I think that's probably fair.
Okay. What if I said 90?
I think whoever's starting at right guard is getting, I think they know who's starting at right guard.
Right. And that's why I'm at I'm almost wondering if, because I'm answering Gabe Van Sickle too, and I think I'm wondering if it's, hey, Gabe's been doing this, we're going to let him rock. Because some of this is projecting. Josh Padilla is going to be the starting center next year, potentially, if Carson Hinsman doesn't come back. So what if it's just, hey, Josh, focus on center, and Gabe Van Sickle is going to be our starting right guard? And if that's the case, that also benefits Philip Daniels, because he knows who's playing to his left, and they've been repping that. And he's gotten a chance to get a little bit healthier. Whatever bumps and bruises he was dealing with, he can get through. And so, as you said earlier, Gillis, he didn't give up a single pressure against Texas, and he was dealing with Colin Simmons all night, all afternoon. That was an afternoon game. This is going to be a night game. He only gave up 2 pressures to Penn State. He really only gave up 2 to Indiana. He just gave up a bad sack at one point. So I think if he can get back to what he was, and maybe some of that is just simply, I know who's playing to my left, let's lock in and let's roll. And then all of a sudden, Rueben Bain is just, he's good, but it's like he's not wrecking the football game. And that's how you get to a world where, Gillis, you're talking about the defensive line and saying that they have to wreck this game or they can't win this football game. Well, the key to wrecking this game is whether or not I think Philip Daniels can get back to where he was when he was healthy, and it was a clear cut who was going to be playing right guard for him. That's all I got. Any other thoughts? We have 5 minutes to spare. Any other offense versus defense thoughts that people have before we close out?
I think just in general, this has to be the area that Miami wins or they're screwed. If Miami doesn't, this, like I said, I think if Ohio State comes to a draw with Miami, you'll take that on the offensive line and defensive line. If Miami's defense comes to a draw with Ohio State's offense, I don't think that's a winning proposition for them. Miami has to win this facet of the game, because I simply don't think that winning 4-31 is there for the taking. Is if there's no defense or special teams scores, right? I don't think that this is a game that Ohio State necessarily needs to run away from being a shootout. I think that would actually benefit them pretty significantly in this one.
Yeah. I think this was a fun breakdown, because this is kind of where I think the game gets decided, because I have so much trust in Ohio State's defense that they won't give up more than 20 points in a game. And honestly, if you want to go lower and say the number's 13 for that too, right? You feel pretty confident in Ohio State's defense. And it comes down to what Ohio State's offense can do against this Miami defense to really kind of decide whether this is a game that Ohio State can maybe kind of run away with, or whether this is going to be a game going into the fourth quarter and late into the fourth quarter. So it's a fun matchup. Watching this offensive line go against Bain and Messidor is going to be a lot of fun.
I think it's going to be fun watching everybody down in South Florida look at Jeremiah Smith like public enemy number one. I'm saying this because I just scrolled on Twitter and came across a quote tweet of his devil tweet, and someone said, "Our boy's putting on for the crib while you putting on for Columbus, Ohio." And the response right under that is, and it was the right choice, with a meme of him holding the trophy from last year. But no, in all seriousness, I think all of our concepts of what we think Ohio State is either need to be validated on December 31st or it's time for them to die. Win or lose, because we've reached this point where, and I talked about this on the Red Spot with our texters, like, we all think Ohio State is this. We all think Julian Sand is this and that, and they've been very, very good. But, like, I mean, how many more games are you going to say, hey, man, when they turn it on, hey, man, when they finally let Julian Sand lose, until they actually do it against a good football team? So if they let Julian be Julian and these receivers be these receivers, I think they're going to win the football game by at least 2 scores. If they don't, I think they're going to win the football game by 1 score. And they're opening the door for that to potentially be a loss if you pair that with the offensive line maybe not being where it needs to be. Get the text 614-350-3315. That's Ohio State's offense versus Miami's defense. Tomorrow we will be doing the same thing, same questions, same categories, just we're going to be flipping it and doing Ohio State's defense against Miami as the Bucks prepare to play the Hurricanes in the Cotton Bowl on December 1st. We will be there in Dallas, Texas. 614-350-3315. 2-week free trial. $3.99 after that for Stefan Krajisnik and Andrew Gillis. I'm Stephen Means, and I still have not yelled. Talk to you guys later.
Hey, Ryan Reynolds here for Mint Mobile. You know, one of the perks about having 4 kids that you know about is actually getting a direct line to the big man up north. Mm-hmm. And this year, he wants you to know the best gift that you can give someone is the gift of Mint Mobile's unlimited wireless for $15 a month. Now, you don't even need to wrap it. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.